we talk about the song. One of the things that you want to try doing with this piece is that I refer to it as holding a melody. What do I mean by holding a melody? You know when you have this idea that something is greater than the sum of its parts? Well, that's kind of what a melody is, right? The notes on their own, even just taken separately, if you've got like 9 notes in a melody, if you take just 3 of those, it's not as strong. But in the context of, and it's the importance of realizing it in the context of a whole melody. And holding a melody can be one of the most challenging things in the harmonica. But the point is that even if someone only hears, let's say you got a 9 note melody, even if someone only hears 3 notes of that melody, if you play it as belonging to that melody, then the implication that it's going somewhere makes it sound greater than it is, and that it came from somewhere, that it's going somewhere, so that your playing has direction, that your playing has movement. One of the ways we can do this is to have a when I say to have tempo, to say play in time, but we do something called rubato. And I'm not going to get into it massively, but rubato is where let's say you've got 3 notes, and what you'll do is you might say, for example, spend more time on the first note and then less time on the next 2 notes, so that the overall shape of the notes is still in time, so that by the time you get from the start of the 3 notes to the end of the 3 notes, it's the same space of time that it takes to get there, but how you deviate within there, or how you deviate within those 3 notes, could be rubato. So you might lean heavily on the first note and then speed the next 2 notes up. This is basically what rubato is, or is. Or you might play the first note quick and then lean on the next 2 notes. And the reason I'm talking about rubato is because when I say to play in time, your instinct might be to just go with the Swan, da, 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 da. And you might be thinking, well, often people play, and this is a general classical thing, often people don't play classical music like that. But you can still imply a sense of time by making sure that you're depending on the groupings you have, but making sure there is overall time, either over a giant set of 10 notes, it could be a set of 3 notes, 5 notes, it could be a set of 20 notes, whatever. But you have a feeling of time by ensuring that you've got this give and take, so that the piece doesn't just slow down and the piece doesn't just speed up. It's still constant, it's still consistent, but there is rubato within that. So there is give and take, slowing down and speeding up, creating a sense of balance. And if you say, for example, do something whereby you say, when I slow down, I speed up, by having that, or if I speed up, so if I slow down a bit of notes, I speed up the next one, so I speed up somewhere down the line in the phrase or melody. If you do that, it creates a sense of balance to your playing. And this is how you hold a melody, essentially. The other aspect of holding a melody, which I'll briefly mention as well, is to play in absolute time. What do I mean by absolute time? Like, someone who has absolute time means that if I play 3 notes to you, you know exactly what a tempo is. Absolute time. And if you can imply, either with rubato or absolute time, if you can imply a shape, a pulse, a feeling of movement in your playing, then that's a situation whereby, even if someone in the context of a 9-note phrase, if they only hear 3 notes, it feels like it belongs to something more. And that's what I'm talking about when I say hold a melody. And that's what we want to do when we play the Swan. We're holding a melody. There is a line. The key word that sums both of those ideas up is consistency. Consistency in your playing. And you can add consistency either through that rubato method, the rubato giving and taking away time, or the absolute time method. You can also add consistency in your dynamics. You can keep all the notes even. You can play all the notes with the same intensity. You can play all the notes with the same volume. You can play all the notes all joined up or legato. So if you go through this piece, and I'm going to talk about my interpreting, how I look at it. Again, if you're wanting to practice this, In other videos, I talked about this idea of breaking things into phrases, but one of the most difficult things you're going to find with this piece is all the changes of air direction and combined with slide movements. So as you're trying to play it better and better, you'll have to just practice those individual movements to get them smooth, and you'll have to break things down into a smaller phrase you need, right? So what I mean by this, take the first three notes. Take the first three notes, right? Take the first two notes. Those first three notes. There's a lot going on there. Don't be discouraged. But the way to practice it is to find groups groups of notes that are practical to practice. So you see that first three notes? And you'll practice that. And the way you'll practice that is first you'll find the notes. And then you'll get familiar with the gaps. So you found the notes. And then you've got to get familiar with the gaps. So you'll go. And familiarity might be something like, oh, I thought that gap felt bigger than it was. When you start to have those kind of realizations, that's when you're really getting on the right track. So that's how you break that down. If you look at if you take the third bar and the fourth bar, right? Say you practice the third bar and you practice the fourth bar. And then you practice. Then what you have to do is you have to practice joining those two up, because then you realize there's a. You've got to practice getting. And so sometimes you might find yourself in a situation where you might think, okay, because of that, I'm going to practice. But practicing that is going to be very intimidating. But if you have mastered and then practicing be so much easier, because you don't have to think about or. That's the approach you need to take. That's how you break it down. You build it up slowly. And the great thing about doing that is that as you're doing all of this, you're just getting better and better and better at the piece. By the time you get to going, you'll be really good. And there's another hidden bonus to that. When you've practiced that, pieces often have a lot of similar intervals. You are accidentally practicing things further down the page, or techniques that will help you further down the page. The simple practice of instead of spending your time just muddying your way through the whole piece and not quite getting it, if you focused even just on that first phrase, getting good at that. So say you've got 30 minutes, right? Instead of spending your 30 minutes just about learning the whole piece, you spend your 30 minutes learning that phrase, you're just going to play the rest of the piece better. It's a more efficient way of learning. And the thing that you find is that, and there is a balance, because sometimes if something is boring, you're not going to want to do it. It's got to be fun, right? But the more you think about, the more time you spend, and the more academic you approach, the better the result. So it's almost like the worse the training, the better the result. And you have a balance. Sometimes you don't want to have absolutely awful training, but you don't want to have useless training. So that's basically what that is. So let's go through it now, and I'll just talk about how I play it and things you might want to think about. So when we talk about the C's, right? You'll notice I sometimes use the slide for C's to draw C. That's because sometimes it's logical. I mean, I put on the music, I put the C's that I think you should use. Sometimes I use it in places where it isn't logical. It makes my life harder and I'm doing that to keep the air direction, but it's more awkward. That's because it's like a very advanced kind of thing you shouldn't do what I'm doing, because I'm just being me sort of thing. So obviously we're going to draw the first C because we can, and there's time. Because it's followed by a B, right? It's followed by a jaw. So the first phrase I play a bit like this. And sometimes I'll I'll come up for that for on that bar for bar 6. Say that again. I'll have a little bit a little bit of a pause there. And for the next, and again, I'm doing this this is a very sort of plainer way of playing it, because when you really get into it, you can do all your own kind of thing. You do all kind of things, and then maybe I'll get into a whole hyper advanced version of this one day. But for now, it's just a way of looking at it. So the next bar or the next phrase, because it's rising, we're going to put a crescendo there. It's going to get louder, and I'll put a bit of vibrato on the bottom one. But I'll also, because it's a lower note, I'll start piano, quieter, and because it's going to cut, and because to leave myself somewhere to go as well with the crescendo. And with my rubato, often sometimes when you rise with a phrase, I will not only increase the dynamics, but I'll also speed up and then slow down. Vibrato. An example of vibrato. Sort of thing. And then we have the same when we have what we might call kind of like an echoing phrase, because we've heard this shape before. And I'll bring the dynamic down because it's a contrasting moment. I'll also bring it down to highlight as an echo. So it's like an echo of the first phrase. And then rising up again, I'll do the same thing with the rising next phrase. And what I did there is I started off a bit slower to give myself somewhere to go as I got faster, and then I got slower towards the end because of vibrato. Then I'll do the contrast again. So you notice the pattern. I'm kind of when I have a loud moment, and then I followed by a quiet one. I'll do that properly. And the phrase after that might be a bit of an echo, so I might play that quieter still. Definitely blow that C. Don't do what I do with joy, because that's just like a hyper advanced way of playing it. The next phrase, I'll do what we call a mezzo forte. So it's not loud, but it's not quiet. It's like moderately loud, I guess you'd say, better to say. The next phrase I'll do quietly as an echo. And here I'll slow down, because it's leading, it's towards the end of a phrase and it's coming back to return to the initial phrase. And then I'll come back in tempo. And that'll be I'll do the same thing, but that'll be really loud there. And I'll become louder. Then I'll come down a little bit. Or you could keep the intensity, it's up to you, but then I'll go. And you could have an echo there, so you could go. Do the next phrase quieter if you wanted. And then I usually keep that in time. Sometimes I'll do a little bit of a slowdown because it's coming to the end. And then I'll The next parts will be quite delicate. So I'm slowing down all the way through. Each phrase is a little bit slower. Da, 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 da. I place the note. Because it's kind of like dying away. Just dying away softly. And I take your time at that point as well.